Well, the time has finally come. This has been a movie that I think was one of the very first ones that popped into my mind to do an episode about. And some of you guys out there that have seen the show notes and wherever you saw on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or wherever you saw the show pop up, and you're like, Summer School? Summer School doesn't sound like a scary movie at all. And it's not. Summer School is not a horror movie. While we've done comedies on here before, and this movie came out in 1987. So this was at the kind of the peak of the 80s cheesiness that was out there. And I've talked about Summer School briefly in previous episodes, but now that it's finally summer, check local listings, it's like 100 degrees here today. And so it's a perfect time to cover Summer School. So that's what this episode is. We are going to be talking about the 1987 horror classic Summer School.
You know, this is one of those films that escaped me. I never got around to seeing it. It was funny because it's a movie that I could picture. Had I have seen this back when it came out, I would have probably watched this thing relentlessly. I would have probably worn out the VHS because it just reminded me of all those movies I used to watch back then. All those late 80s comedies, kind of that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but like the John Candy movies back then. It's got that the Breakfast Club kind of feel to it. Back to School, all that stuff, like that late 80s kind of feel. And this was such a fun film. I was surprised like how much I actually enjoyed it.
The reason why I wanted to do this movie for so long was because, and I'm almost positive I've told this story on here at least once, if not multiple times. This movie, even though it is a comedy movie, this movie does have some horror themes in it. This is one of those movies where if you go to any horror discussion group out there and you mention Summer School, there's going to be like people like, oh, I love that movie. That movie is definitely a horror, falls into the horror realm, kind of. And there are two main characters in this movie, and there's a couple of stories I'll tell about this movie. One of them, if you'd never seen this movie before, Mark, and actually, I wasn't sure if you had or not, but one of them, then I think will maybe be a little bit of a surprise to you, to where you'll be like, oh, that's where that came from. But the first story I will tell about this movie is, again, which I'm sure I told on here before, back in the days of, 1987, I lived in the same town that, me and Mark lived in. Me and my mother watched Summer School on like HBO or something, like one day. I'm assuming it was during the summer because it was like during the day, and she wasn't at work, which she worked off and on, but my dad wasn't home, so I'm assuming it was like during the week. But anyway, we'd watched this movie, and then after we got done watching this movie, we ran to the local video store and picked up Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And that was the first time I ever saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, I remember you telling that story to me. I don't know if you probably said it here on the show as well, but I think I remember even you telling me that when we were kids.
Yeah.
When you said it again, it reminded me of like, oh yeah, because I remember you bringing up like the characters and stuff that talked about this.
Yeah, there are a number of characters. But there are two characters in this movie, Dave and Chainsaw. And I think they could be interchangeable depending on the day of the week. But really, Dave and Chainsaw would have been Mark and Shannon if we had done our high school careers together.
Mm-hmm.
But the Dave and Chainsaw, and we'll get to the rest of this story here before too long, but these are two like horror-obsessed characters in this film. And, the title of the movie is Summer School, of course. So the main plot of the movie is all of this stuff is happening in and around summer school. And these two are, horror movie aficionados, and they're all they talk about is horror movies and, special effects and, movies and this and that. And of course their favorite movie is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So that movie gets brought up several times throughout this movie, which is part of the reason why this particular movie falls into that sweet spot amongst a lot of horror fans that are from, a certain time period that, oh man, I loved that movie when I was a kid. And I was actually, personally, I was a little hesitant because it's one of these movies that I remember loving so much when I was younger. And I know there's other movies out there that I haven't seen for a long time. And I haven't seen this one for a long time until we finally started talking about it, because then I was finally like, oh, it finally gives me a chance to pick it up on tape, and then I can watch it again.
Did you watch this on tape?
I did watch it on tape.
Really?
And I was a little apprehensive at first. I was like, man, I hope this isn't going to suck. But to my surprise, the same as you, I was like, oh man, this is great. It was so nostalgic, even though, it was, it's aged a couple years older than we are, but it was still, a lot of the stuff where I could see, oh man, I could totally see that happening. And this really is, to go back to a point that we bring up, not every episode, but we bring it up a few times. This is really one of those movies, when you are watching it, you can tell exactly from when it's from. So this, you put this movie on, and you're, if you are, I would say 40 and over, you're probably going to be able to go, holy crap, this movie is from 1987.
Yeah, it's got that total late 80s vibe to it. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but there's like, you can see the transition from like the early 80s to the late 80s, and this is definitely a late 80s film. I don't know, it's got like reminds me of the later Police Academy films, or
sure,
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Just all those late '80s films. It just falls right in some of those later John Candy movies, some of those later John Hughes movies. It's got that kind of feel good vibe to it. Kirstie Alley. It totally was a film that I don't. Somehow, whatever reason, I never saw it back then, but there were a lot of films like this that, man, were like constants in my VHS collection back in the day.
Yeah,
I also thought it was kind of cool too that it's kind of funny that shows like kind of how certain movies just really stick out and have this longevity. But like the guy, like one of the guys, the dark-haired guy of the two guys that are like you and I can't remember. Chainsaw, right?
Yeah, Chainsaw.
Yep. He in his bedroom, he's got posters of horror movies, and he's got Friday the 13th and Jaws 2 and Jaws 3D, and I'm like thinking, damn, this is like 1987, but this could easily be like 2018. These, like, you think of like Stranger Things, like some of the movies with the posters that people had up, and it's like, yeah, this is like, it's like this stuff is still relevant today. It's just amazing.
The story to this movie, real quick here. So basically what this is this is back in the day, in the late 80s, when summer school was kind of a punishment. Because I don't know about you with your kids, but my kids, throughout their entire school career, ever since they were like in kindergarten and first grade, they could sign up for summer school, which is kind of a 4-week program, 6 weeks program. I can't remember how long it is in the summer, that they do like fun activities and stuff, kind of like I don't want to say babysitting, but kind of like where kids can sign up and you pay a fee, whatever it is. I don't know what it is, and then your kids can go to that for the 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it is during the summer, and then help with daycare and those kind of things. But they do fun stuff. But back when I was a kid and you were a kid, And when this movie was made, summer school was where you went when you failed English or you failed math or algebra or whatever, and you had to go take this course over the summer to make up for that class, or you failed it. And so what this movie is this high school has this summer school program, and they need I think it's an English class that the teacher that was supposed to teach it wins the lottery or something, and so they need to fill that position. And this Mr. Shoop character, Freddie Shoop, he's the gym teacher, and he just happens to be the last one to get out of the parking lot on the last day of school. And the superintendent or whatever he is, the assistant principal or whatever, is like, "Hey, you have to teach summer school." And he's like, "Oh, no, I can't do that. I'm going to go on vacation." And he's like, "Oh, if you don't, then we're going to fire you." And so he's like, "Ah, shit. All right." And so then he ends up teaching summer school, and it's all these delinquents in his class. And like you said, a very young, hot Kirstie Alley is the teacher next door. All this stuff happens. Basically, it's all just at the school, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it's just like a total cheesy 80s, just feel-good comedy. And it's one of those movies where you could really throw it on any time. And, and it's one of these movies, too, where I would say, even though I can't say I really come across this on TV ever. I don't know if I've ever really come across it on TV. But it's one of these movies where I would say almost, like you were saying, like some of the John Hughes movies or John Candy movies or whatever, like Home Alone or, any of those kind of movies to where they come on, Goodfellas, any of those type of movies, Terminator or whatever, comes on and it's 3/4 of the way through the movie and you're still like, "Oh, I love this movie." And then you just finish watching it. It doesn't matter where it's at. You can just finish watching it.
It really was a fun film. I mean, it's like, when you go back to watch an older film, and if you don't have like the connection to it, like there's always like an apprehensive feeling like, well, am I going to like this one? But this one, like, I kind of just connected with me right away. I was like surprised how, oh yeah, I'm just like, it's like what, yeah, like you said, it's just like one of those, oh, I'm like diving right in. It's like as if I've watched this movie 50 million times, back in the day. So I really enjoyed it. Other than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre connection, which was kind of cool to watch them watching like in 8mm film or whatever, watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the classroom. That was pretty cool. But a few things that I found really interesting was you watch some of these old films and these actors and actresses, you're looking at them and you're like, I know who that is. And well, first of all, like Mark Harmon, the main character, I'm not sure. I've seen him in things before, and he's probably has a pretty well-known career, and I'm just completely blind to it. But the one that really caught me, that really connected with me, Shawnee Smith, the pregnant girl. Like, I kept watching her. I'm like, I know who that is. I know who that is. And it's the freaking girl from Saw.
Oh, yeah, right. Yep.
I could not believe. I was like, yeah, that's who it is. But then, even before I realized it was Amanda from Saw, it was who I knew I had seen her before in a movie, and it goes back to the late '80s and the VHS films that I rented nonstop. She was also in a John Candy movie called Who's Harry Crumb, which was one of those just feel good, fun, goofy movies that. Back then, like I, watched constantly. It was on cable. We recorded it or whatever. We rented it. And she was like kind of like the, the main girl in that film. And so I knew who she was. I couldn't figure it out. And then like when I realized she was the girl from Saw, that kind of dropped me for a minute. I was like, I couldn't believe it. Like, holy crap.
That was one of the first, this most recent time when I watched it. That was one of the things that I had said too. I was like, oh, that's girls from Saw, because they're the Mark Harmon character. So if you don't know who Mark Harmon is, I'll say this to you, and then you'll be like, oh, that's who he is. He like most recently was like in like some of those like military type movie, or not movies, but military type shows that are on like CBS. Like, but you know, you got to remember too. You know, he's 20, 30 years older, but like Jag, whatever. You know, those kind of shows.
Yeah, okay.
He was on one of those. Yeah, this movie is definitely filled with Kirstie Alley, of course. But then, I actually forgot that she was in this movie. So like the first time when she like walks around the corner, I was like, "Whoa, that's Kirstie Alley! That's awesome!"
And the other one that caught my eye was Courtney Thorne Smith, who, you know, she was in back in like the 90s. She was in Melrose Place and Ally McBeal, which like she was in like I wasn't like a really big like a fan of those shows. I didn't really watch them, but you know, I just remember back then, you know, I watched a lot of Channel 32 WFLD or Fox 32, and it was like that show was like constantly being advertised. So I mean, you just couldn't get past like Melrose Place. It was like Melrose Place, and so I knew like I recognized her from that. But that's the kind of cool thing about going back to some of these films. You could like catch all these actors and actresses, and you're like, yeah, I remember you're in this now, or you did this, or
yeah, it's always fun when you go back and, like I said, you know, when you haven't seen it for so long, or you're just seeing it for the first time, it's pretty cool. But it's also cool too when, like it's with Kirstie Alley in this one, because I'd seen this movie when I was, you know, whatever, like 87. Well, I probably saw it in 88, so 12, I guess. And you know, like I probably was like, oh yeah, that's the lady from Cheers. Big deal.
Right.
Because I didn't care then, but now when you go back and you're like, that's what's always fun is when you revisit these movies after so long, and then you're even like, whoa,
oh yeah,
cool, she's in it. Because I knew that Mark Harmon was in it, and I knew that the Courtney Thorne Smith character was in there just because those were kind of like the two like main characters really of the movie. But the other characters in the movie, like I knew. Like, I remembered that they were there, but I didn't remember who they were. You know, if that makes sense. Like, I just remember, like, oh, there was a blonde kid and a dark-haired kid. Kind of like Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing, you know, but I didn't remember, like, who played them or anything.
Right.
And so when you see that, and you're like, oh, hey, yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that... There was other stuff that popped up that I was like, oh, that's where that came from. Because so I have two other stories, and these go back to Dave and Chainsaw, because again, those were the characters that I always kind of associated with this movie. There's a sequence in the movie where Chainsaw has an issue with some sunglasses, and he writes to the sunglass company, and they send him, you know, a bunch of sunglasses for free. I tried that a couple times. I've never had success with that. So if anybody out there has ever had success with like getting free stuff from companies, if you could tell me what the verbiage is that you've used in that would be great. So that happened. But the other story that came from summer school that does involve me and you, and I don't know if you know this actually came from this particular movie, but I am pretty sure that it did, because the scene that I have always had in my head is in this movie. So there's a scene in this movie where the Mark Hamill character, Mr. Shoop, is told to leave. He quits, gets fired, whatever the case is, and he goes. And then, of course, you know, being an 80s feel-good, you know, movie, the kids are all like, oh, he did actually leave? Well, we want him back, kind of a thing. So they bring in a substitute teacher. Well, Dave and Chainsaw are like, oh, well, we're going to scare her off. So they take some of their special effects expertise, and they go throughout, and they have all of the other students in the classroom, you know, using practical effects, I will point out, like in these various stages of decay and death, as you will. And there's, you know, somebody has a saw blade in their head, somebody else has their throat slit. My favorite, actually, is the is the Amanda character, or not the Amanda character, but the pregnant girl, Rhonda,
Yes.
who has the ruler or whatever it is in her mouth,
Oh yeah.
kind of thing.
That's pretty cool.
But there was another character. Who was it? Was it Nick? Whoever it was, the stripper guy. He is like laying on like a stretcher thing, and he's like pulling his guts out.
Yeah, that was cool.
So now I don't know if you remember this or not, but I vividly remember this. So when we were in 6th grade, our 6th grade class used to always host a haunted house.
Oh yes, I remember.
And so it was always up to, everybody to come up with different ideas for the haunted house. And so, of course, our class was filled with myself, you, a couple of our friends, and a couple other people who, we didn't necessarily regularly hang out with, who were, big horror movie fans. And so we were like, oh, hey, let's do this. And one of the ideas that I had suggested that got shot down like immediately was like, oh, we could have a guy like laying down, and then we could just have like some like tubing or something, and he could like be like playing with his guts. And that was totally from summer school. And I remember Mr. Bailey was like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. We're not doing that at all.
Oh, bummer. Bummer.
And it wasn't anything other than I always remember the reasoning by him and the faculty was, we can't scare the kindergartners.
That's funny.
But yeah, this movie is totally. If we would have went to school together in high school, this would have been totally our summer. One of the years we would have been in summer school together. And we would have been doing the same thing, except for we probably would have been pushing like Friday the 13th or Halloween.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, we would have been running around. We would have been running around with those clear, goofy masks from Alice, Sweet Alice, trying to scare everybody.
We were told, that would totally been us. Absolutely. Another thing, a real quick reference I want to toss in too, is that I was trying to think like, what other Texas Chainsaw Massacres were made prior to this film, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, I believe, came out in '85. So that was out prior to this film as well. And if you see the scene, like the scene that you just talked about, where all the the kids are wearing the fake gore and everything, and like the principal comes in, and all that whole scene. Well, Chainsaw and his buddy, like they come walking in with chainsaws, and like they pretend like they're the ones who killed everybody. And Chainsaw does the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Leatherface dance, like where he puts his chainsaw up in the air and does like the little thing with his feet. And that was completely a reference of Leatherface from Part 2. So although the original was their favorite, he happened to copy the Part 2 thing. I just wanted to do some little geekdom right there and toss that in there.
Yeah, I wonder, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3 probably would have came out pretty close to this one, too.
Yeah, a couple of years later, I think. 1 or 2 years later.
Yeah.
So it's right around there.
If you've never seen Summer School, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that haven't, but it does have kind of holds a special place for a lot of horror fans, especially those of us who grew up with cable in the 80s. Specifically like 80, I would assume probably 88 was probably when this was playing on all the cable channels. There's a lot of people out there that are like, it doesn't matter. It's got a ton of horror references in it. And again, to go back to me and you, even though I don't really have a story for this, even though we've probably talked a little bit about this on here in the past, maybe during our Tiffany episode, maybe. The thing that I always thought was kind of funny was Dave and Chainsaw, the two horror aficionados in this movie. They are trying to impress the same girl with the horror stuff to try to get that one girl to like both of them. And I'm like, we did the same thing.
That's pretty much us. Yeah, absolutely. Wow, what a good flick. I'm glad. I hope maybe we could dive into some more films along these lines. I mean, I totally give this one an absolute thumbs up, two thumbs up, or whatever. I was just really impressed by it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was nostalgic, even though I hadn't never seen it before.
Yeah, this definitely falls into. This is one of those movies to where, and I know this has kind of been sort of our theme recently, is the whole beer and popcorn movie. This definitely falls into that realm, but at the same time, this is one of those movies to where if you're looking for, it's a rainy day and you're looking for something fun to watch with the wife and kids, or just the wife or just the kids, this is definitely something you can kind of pull out. There's really not a whole lot in this movie that's I don't think is really inappropriate. I mean, there's a little bit of fake gore on one scene, but again, if you're willing to watch Beetlejuice or Ghostbusters with your kids, you're fine.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing else really in this movie. It's not like some of the other 80s movies of the time that were rated PG or rated PG-13, and then there's 25 minutes of boobs in the movie.
Right.
I give this one a thumbs up as well. This one is definitely one of, I would say, one of my childhood favorites for sure. And this is one of those ones. This episode, I was so tempted to try to get my mom to do this one with us.
Oh, nice.
But then I was kind of like, I don't know how that's going to work. Trying to explain to a 60-plus-year-old woman how this all works. Even though she wouldn't have to do anything, I'd just be like, no, I'll just call you. And then she'd be like, what? Could you imagine that? Like, hey, Mom, I'm going to have you on the podcast. And she'd have been like, okay, how do I do that?
Yeah. That would have been kind of cool.
It would have been, but we'll get them on someday.
Yeah, we got a lot more to cover.